irrespective of who we are, or where we are, a class such as this provides the opportunity to slow down and actually interrupt our perhaps very world-orientated train of activities and thoughts that we might be caught up in. In fact, life without these moments of reflections just becomes a conveyor belt, a rat race, a spinning wheel of just endless one thing after another having to be dealt with. One of the benefits of this pandemic and lockdown for some people, not for all, has been that it has actually enforced a slowing down, created a lot more space around where we normally live in terms of being able to pay attention to where we live. Some of that may, of course, raise issues, may make it very hard if one doesn't have access to a garden or somewhere outside. In other cases, actually, it's a sort of containment, having to relinquish one's normal patterns and habits. And very sort of mixed response to that. Some people like it, some people don't. But it doesn't matter whether we like it or not. From the point of view of Dhamma, it's basically having to accept the situation that we find ourselves in and see what the reactions are, what the response is. It's not about not having reactions, it's about being present to the reactions that we do have. It's also not about passive acceptance. It's about, one could say, sort of active acceptance, which allows one to take the decisions that we have to take given the circumstances that we happen to find ourselves in. So being the Theravada class, we need a beginning, then the class itself, and then the end of the class. So I'd like to suggest that we will have the dedication of offerings chant to start off with, which Wendy will put up on the screen for us, on the screen share. We will chant the 3 refuges, the dedication of offerings, the 3 refuges, and the 5 precepts. We will do all that in Pali, except for the precepts, which we'll do in Pali and in English. I always like to suggest that we determine the precepts in English so that we understand what we're actually determining, what we're deciding to do with our words and our actions, our deeds. So I'll turn to my shrine here. You're very welcome to light a candle on your shrine, but that's what I'd like to do. It's on page 18 of the chanting book or on the screen that Wendy has kindly just put up for us. So if you're all muted, which I think you are, I'll chant the dedication of offerings. You're very welcome to join me if your conditions allow. Yoso bhagava araham samma sambuddho swakato yena bhagavata dhammo Supatipanno yasa bhagavato savaka sambho tamayam bhagavantam sadammam sasangham imehi sakare hiyataraham aropitehi abhipujayama Saruno Bante Bhagava Suchira Parini Bhutopi Pachima Janatanu Pamanasa Ime Sakare Dogatapanna Karabhute Patiganhatu Amhakam Digaratam Hitaya Sukhaya Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi. Feel free to bow. Sakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. We have page 128, dedication of offerings. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And we take the three refuges. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. I'll go straight to the Five Precepts on page 129. Anatipata Verimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Verimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu me chachara verimani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musawada verimani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura meraya macha pamadatana verimani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugatim yanti, silena bhogasampada, silena nibutim yanti, tasma siddham visodaye. These are the five precepts. Virtue is a source of happiness. Virtue is a source of true wealth. Virtue is a source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we bow 3 times again, optional. So before we settle down to a quiet sitting, I just wanted to sort of reaffirm and underline the significance of the taking the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. To a secular-minded person, it might be sort of questioned, why the ritual, why the chanting, why can't it just be stated as a statement as opposed to chanted? And I think there are some probably good reasons, quite valid psychological, neurological reasons why it might be good to actually create a bit of a ritual around a determination such as the Five Precepts and a commitment to the Three Refuges. It basically strengthens the connection between the intention and how that intention is put into practice. It creates an emotional set of associations. We know from neuroscience that chanting or singing produces a different effect in the brain. It's engages more of the brain than just saying something. Chanting it, having a tune, having some kind of melody, even if it's a repetitive one, also has a rhythmic quality to it, and it registers. Like many of you, I had my doubts about all this at the beginning, but skeptical, but willing to give it a try. And I have found that just now, having done it for so many years, that just chanting the Three Refuges and Five Precepts always elicits sort of a response which makes it feel a bit special, a bit different. It's associated with all the teachings one has heard, the context in which I've heard them, which one has heard them, whether it be retreats or meditation workshops such as this one, which always touch on this dimension of life which is, as it were, outside of our normal everyday, mainly everyday activities. Just adds another dimension of reflection, the sort of area of life where we think about where we are, about our happiness, unhappiness, the sort of existential questions of, what's this all about? And repetition of these little rituals every time, every day, actually helps embed them, and as I say, creates a sort of conditioned response, because our practice is essentially a reconditioning ourselves, exposing ourselves to a set of values and injunctions which promote inquiry and which promote calmer, peaceful states of mind and reflections on the nature of reality as we experience it. And as such, they're deeply enriching. So we will sit now. My watch says it's coming up to 7:15. We'll sit till about 7:15, which will give us time to slow down on the level of the mind, and hopefully on the level of the emotions, and physically as well. So our attention, instead of focus on the outside world, will gradually shift and turn inwards. Inwards, what does inwards mean? It means into our inner selves. What's an inner self? Well, it's a sense of presence that we have. What's behind the thoughts? What's behind our emotions and all the narratives that run through our brain? Well, behind all the noise of our mind, on whatever level, there is a stillness, there's an emptiness. So we're effectively going into the emptiness within us. Just observing the silence between the words. Noticing the stillness that comes with the silence. And even if we don't experience it as such all of the time. It can be noticed, it can be known. What happens to our attention when we're not thinking? When we have no thing to focus on. We just get closer to the moment, to noticing the arising of thoughts, but not following it through, just letting it peter out. We can check our posture, make sure it's comfortable and conducive to paying attention. So it's a balance between a relaxed posture, but one which is upright and alert at the same time. We can extend the exhalation of 2 or 3 breaths. So we exhale normally and just pause for 2 or 3 seconds. We can do that 2 or 3 times. It also has a calming, slowing down effect. So nothing is being forced here. Just allowing nature to do what nature is doing, which is just the arising of mental phenomena. Noticing the arising of physical sensations. Letting them arise and cease. Just relaxing into the stillness and silence. Which is always available behind all our mental activity. Just connecting with this sense of being, sense of I amness, right here, right now. knowing, either in theory or through insight, that we are not the things that arise in our awareness. Sensations come and go. Some are pleasant, some are not. We just notice them as being either pleasant or unpleasant. We notice our general state of mind, our disposition towards the world. Sad or melancholy, or anxious or relaxed, tense perhaps, preoccupied. And we notice the contents of the mind. Noticing if our mind is gravitating towards some anticipation, or mulling over some incident today, some exchange. We're feeling a bit restless. Sleepy and drowsy and tired. We just notice whatever arises in our attention. And even as we sit, we just notice the natural inhalation and exhalation of the breath. Which we can use as an anchor, a reference point to come back to, should we get lost in our thoughts. As we open our eyes, we notice the brightness of the colors, space around us. And we see it all with fresh eyes as well. And we observe the different quality of experience, having had 30 minutes or so of just mainly silence. If there was any noise, it was hopefully in most cases our own inner noise. But just this ability to step out of ourselves, as it were, into presence. This gives us a new perspective. So do feel free to stretch your legs, stretch your arms, stretch your body. We find ourselves embodied, and it's important to look after the body, take care of it. It's our vehicle in this lifetime, in this existence. Well, we have 40 minutes or so together. I can offer a few reflections, but I also thought it might be an opportunity to hear what some of you might want to say or ask, raise a topic or a theme that might feel relevant. And perhaps we can look at it together, see what comes up or what might be there already and could be shared. So if you'd like to share something, do feel free to either raise your hand, preferably using that little sign in the chat box. I think it's in the chat box that it appears, the sign, or is it in the participants? No, in the chat box. Maybe it's in participants. Not sure where it is on my little device, but anyhow. Yes, someone's just put something in the chat box. Hello, can we speak? Yes, you can. You can speak if you unmute yourself, then just feel free to.
Yes, hello.
Hello?
I wanted to ask, what is the name of this meditation ritual that we just did?
Meditation ritual. When you say meditation ritual, you're referring to the guided meditation or the chant at the beginning of before we meditated?
Yes, so actually I joined in late, and this is like my first time doing
Oh,
this. Yeah.
okay.
So I only came in for the meditation part. Like I wasn't here for the earlier part. So yeah.
Right. Well, the earlier part belongs to comes from the Theravada forest, Thai forest tradition. If you go to the Amaravati.org website, it's the monastery which has a chanting book that is printed, and in that there's a whole series of chants. And the traditional one that we chanted was the taking of the refuges and precepts.
Okay.
Taking refuge is a sort of symbolic way of making a commitment to truth,
Mm-hmm.
to an enlightened state of mind, taking refuge in an enlightened state of mind, taking refuge in reality as well, which is the Dharma or the teachings,
Mm-hmm.
and taking refuge in the Sangha, which is basically qualities of virtue and uprightness. So it's a symbolic practice, and traditionally it's performed by many Buddhists in many countries. And in fact, it's a way that a Buddhist declares himself. If one wants to be seen as a Buddhist, one does it formally in Pali and in English, and something that informs one's everyday life. So it comes from the forest tradition, Thai forest tradition. So if you go to amaravati.org, there'll be a little bit about the history, about the monastery, and the teachers who teach this workshop, myself, Martin, and some of the nuns, and occasionally, it's been a while since a monk has come actually, because it's mainly a nun's evening, come and teach and just share the Dhamma, share reflections to basically inspire, inform, and teach.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. May I ask where you've come from? Where are you based?
Well, actually, I'm in Switzerland.
In Switzerland. Amazing. Isn't
Yeah.
technology extraordinary? Yeah. So this is a weekly group organized by the Buddhist Society, as you know. And it's associated primarily with Amaravati Buddhist Monastery, or Chithurst, two monasteries here in the south of England.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. So most of the people in this class are from England?
Most of the people probably in this class will be England-based, but we do get people coming now with Zoom from all over the place. Lots of countries, continents, in fact, from America, South America. We have some people coming from Singapore occasionally, so Far East Asia, Thailand. Yeah, I think it's important to sort of find either a group or a teacher that you feel sort of attuned to, inspired or interested in, because sometimes we have to shop around at the beginning a bit to find something that feels right, that sounds right. The nice thing about this particular tradition is that it's, although it's quite clear about what it's teaching, it's very open-minded. And there's no force on anything. There's no injunctions except guidance and pointers, which we follow at our own discretion to the best of our ability. And essentially, it's about developing wisdom, developing insight, and practicing generosity, being kind, being generous, and generally just basically having this inquiry into what is reality. What does my life consist of? What makes up my life? Who am I?
Yeah.
Sort of very, very basic questions. And the answers that come can be offered in the form of words and communication. But essentially, the whole thrust of Buddhist teachings is it leads towards one's own realization, an individual realization of the way things are. So it's a pointing to the nature of reality, and which we, as it were, affirm and discover in our own experience. And that will involve basically leading a moral and ethical life to keep it simple, as uncomplicated as possible, as respectful, truthful, and virtuous and kind. It's about developing meditation skills, which means an ability to basically be still, be accepting. One may have reactions, but not get overwhelmed by reactions, so that we create a bit of space around the situations we find ourselves in life. And most of all, to find where our real, true happiness exists. Where are we investing our energy for our happiness? On the conventional level, most of our happiness is sought in health, in status, in family and relationships, in wealth, in terms of assets that we might have, which is all fine. There's no injunction against it, no condemnation of that per se. But that's just one level of reward or well-being that we can have, which is one very dependent on conditions. And what we learn by looking for happiness in conditions is that the conditions are constantly changing, very transient. And in being transient, they're never fully satisfactory, never really fully rewarding. We may have moments when things are going fine and hunky-dory, but something comes along and breaks it up. Either the conditions, external conditions change, or we change. We find that what we've been looking for or getting no longer pleases us. So that's one level of sort of happiness and well-being, very worldly, very conditioned. There's another level of experience which can also be very rewarding, immensely rewarding, more rewarding actually than the material world, and that's the world of meditation, the very refined states that one can achieve if one trains and practices enough. And those are states of increasingly deep absorption, regarded as samadhi practice or concentration practice, where the mind basically is very, very still, very, very calm and centered, at which point we start losing our sense of identity, which allows for an expansion of consciousness, which allows us to experience an incredible expansion of consciousness, not limited by physical conditions. This is quite a powerful experience. It's often referred to as sort of a peak experience, perhaps, a samadhi experience. In other traditions, it could be called a kundalini experience, where basically energetically there's a complete reorganization of energy as we disidentify with a name, body, and basically allow for an expansion of consciousness. So that's another level of well-being that we can all potentially experience. But the ultimate level of well-being is basically insight into the cessation of identity, referred to as nirvana, or just basically looking for the word, it's escaped me. An extinguishing, that's the word I was looking for. An extinguishment of desire, where one is completely attuned to the nature of reality, where there is no identification with the sense of self. One sees through the whole personality structure. One sees through all the external forms of rites and rituals and vows and precepts. And this is such a profound insight that basically it's completely convincing. There's no doubt at all that this is actually an insight into the nature of reality. And this sort of breakthrough is called, referred to as stream entry. One breaks through, and one basically connects with a stream which has only one flow, one sense of direction, which is towards full realization. And what we realize or wake up to is not only this, as it were, ultimate reality, but we're also aware, very aware of all the hindrances, all the habits and patterns that we still need to, as it were, purify or work our way through. So in some ways you could see it's the start of a real path of transformation. The hardest part is at the beginning, when it's just a mixture of ideas and speculations, when we're still very much caught up in our reactive patterns. When sitting for half an hour or an hour can be really very, very difficult, very painful, very awkward. When we are very reactive with our emotions, that's the sort of the early stage of practice, which is quite hard to sustain. But with the support of a good teacher, good teachings, fellow practitioners who are referred to as the Sangha, or a community of like-minded people, that path can be, as it were, survived and benefited from until one starts actually getting the fruits of one's practice in one's own experience, at which point it sort of creates a virtual circle where the benefits that we have from our practice start feeding directly into our experience and, as it were, reinforce that practice. So that's a few words which hopefully might go some way to answering your question.
Nick, hi.
Yes, hello. Who's speaking?
Yeah, Will, sorry, hi.
Oh, hi, Will. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Not so much a question, I guess, but just a thought that I thought I'd put out there. But I was sort of wondering how desire might influence how we perceive time. Because it seems like our desire for things is always in the future somewhere. It's always a future thing we want to be or not be or whatever it might be. And I guess not really works it out completely, but just that gap between that desire to be somewhere and where we are now sort of creates like a gap that sort of gives things like a lifespan, if you like. And I just thought I'd throw that out there, really.
Yes, absolutely. What you're referring to is absolutely an experience I think anybody can recognize, that the way we perceive time is constructed. It's from a position of wanting or not wanting something most of the time. We all know the feeling that if we're waiting for something to happen and can't wait, then time seems to slow down and just everything takes so much longer. We just can't simply wait for the clock to move fast enough to get to the time that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And it also works inversely or conversely, where we don't want something to happen and we can't stop the clock. We wish that time could stand still, that we didn't have to go into the meeting or confront an exam or whatever, or confront some difficult situation. And there seems inexorably to be moving towards it. So yes, time is a construct. And you're touching on a very important point, because if we recognize, even intellectually, that time is a construct, it allows us to investigate the present moment with a potentially deeper understanding. When is now? Well, now is always now. Time is created by memory and imagination. It works both ways. Memory in terms of the past, and imagination in terms of the future. It's a mental construct. And we have this remarkable capacity as human beings to imagine things, sort of create virtual realities. The world, our imagination creates so many potential worlds, and which is an incredible power, because it allows us to manipulate situations and other people, because we can construct mental representations of a situation. And if we put enough energy into it, we can make them actually materialize. We can imagine a building and draw some lines down on paper, and all we have is a bit of paper and a few lines on it. But with our imagination, we can actually design a building, and 2 years later or a year later, there's a building there, and it started with an idea. And our capacity to cooperate and work with other human beings has led us to be the supreme being on this planet, which is why we've wiped out so many other species, because our intelligence and capacity to operate as a group, even though individually we might be weak physically, our intelligence can create weapons, and we can use those weapons collectively in a way that destroys life and takes power. So this question of when is now? Now is now. And that's the only time that's real. And if we actually allow ourselves to surrender to present moment awareness, we see that our awareness is a constant element, But what is changing is what is being observed and witnessed on the level of physical form, of conditions, of our emotions, of our sensations, of our thoughts. It's just a flow. And so the pointings of the Buddha really point to this ability that we have to actually, as it were, get to this primary reality before anything arises and see that it's always present, and that things arise in our awareness and cease in awareness, but our awareness is constant. So the choice of word of being the Buddha, woken up, is to wake up to the nature of actual reality, not as a theory, not as a speculation, but as a direct insight, which radically changes our perspective on life. At which point we can experience time as a construct, know it as a construct, but not be controlled by it. In other words, we may have some anticipation, but we know what anticipation is. We can have memories and know what the memories are. We know what is real. And therefore that leads to a much tidier, much better balanced and harmonious inner state of well-being in relationship to the phenomena that we keep on experiencing. So thank you very much for raising that question, because it's one that we can investigate, in our own experience. How many times have we sat on a cushion, and it's maybe a longer sitting of 45 minutes of an hour, and just start feeling a discomfort and noticing the whole reactive process in the body. When we don't want to feel the pain, we sort of try and ignore the pain, suppress the pain, but all the pain does, it just extends that time, and we just can't wait for the bell to ring, because we know that the moment the bell goes, we can go into a state of relaxation, we can let go. And just that anticipation, that waiting, that mental construct that we create, that I mustn't move until the bell goes, is a construction. And the beauty of repeated practice of going through these states of reactivity, and as it were, not surrendering to them, but learning to surrender to them, accept them. After a time, an hour sitting is just a joy, it's just a pleasure, because the body is no longer reacting. It's obviously partly through training, through practice, that the body adapts and learns to sit. So we get through some of the physical discomfort, but the main discomfort that we get through is the mental discomfort. We've just become more patient. And patience is really an absolutely key part of practice. It just puts everything that we're doing into a bigger context, a very accepting context, where we don't get driven or suffer unnecessarily from our hopes, aspirations, desires, and expectations.
Thank you, Nick.
Hello.
Oh.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course. Please do. Who are you? I can't see you. I'm not
I'm
sure.
Rose. Rose, sorry. Yeah,
Hello.
my video is not on. Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering what you might advise the best way to find a teacher might be, please.
It's a very good question. It's trial and error, I'm afraid. You just have to shop around. It's basically like going shopping. If you're looking for an item of clothing that you really want, you go around from shop to shop until you find the shop that's got what you want. And it's a little bit like that with teachers. You always have to look in the right place. The good thing about a tradition such as Buddhism is that it's got a well-established tradition behind it. So that's one advantage of going to a tradition, is that it has a body of teachings, and quite how good or bad the teachers are within that tradition will obviously vary, but you're not at the whim, hopefully, of some egomaniac or self-declared guru who might have a complete distorted perspective and might present himself or herself very well. But coming to events such as this, in this particular group, you will have several teachers coming and teaching. If you go to a monastery setting, go to Amaravati, for instance, on the website there, you have a whole variety of teachings. And what you'll find is that in some point you'll suddenly go, oh my gosh, I like the way this person is speaking about what interests me. They seem to have a handle on it. So you hang about and listen and see what you can learn from them. at some point you'll find, you'll find better and worse teachers, but you'll find that you'll probably have quite a few to work your way through before you find someone whom you might make a really big commitment to. But it's a very good question. You know, you have to trust your curiosity, your doubt. You know, you've got to be a little bit skeptical and just wait and see and be convinced, but don't be too easily convinced. At the end of the day, a good teacher will always refer you back to yourself, that ultimately you have to decide, you have to become your own teacher. So we learn, try things out, some things work, some things don't. Sometimes something may be taught by a teacher which won't work, and then that same thing taught by another teacher will work. So basically, be curious, be interested, and expose yourself to different teachers and see what happens. I wish you well in your hunt, in your search.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Nick.
Yes.
It's Gila.
Could you speak up a little bit? You're very faint.
No? No,
Yeah.
you can't. Okay. I'll just turn it up a bit. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, it's Gila. I've got a question, please. You were saying something earlier, and I thought, oh, I wish you would speak a little bit more about that. And you were saying about reality.
Mm-hmm.
See what reality is. It seems so abstract sometimes, reality, and so far away. But the way you were talking about it earlier was like it's not a concept anymore. It was like just seeing something, isn't it? Because you're always saying it's seeing something for what it is, seeing reality, seeing. Just could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very profound question, actually. But what is reality? It's not about an abstract concept. It's about one's immediate apprehension and experience of reality. So what is reality for you, me, and every human being? Well, first of all, it's something that we experience, which means we use our senses. It's something we're in contact with, something we're in touch with, something that's very real and true. So it's not abstract. It's actually something which can be experienced. Not only can it be experienced, but it can actually be known for what it is. What does that mean, known for what it is? What are the qualities? What are the characteristics of reality? And it comes down to, first of all, contact with phenomena, yes. The experience of that contact, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or not, and everything that flows from that contact, that is created by that contact. But most of all, where is all of this reality, as we call it, happening? It's happening in our immediate experience, which is where? In our awareness. So it's not just what is happening, it's where it's happening and how it's happening. So basically it encompasses everything, but it's immediate and it's always present. It's not an idea about things, it's actually the knowing of things. So what our meditation practice and our practice is about being in the immediacy of the moment. So it's simply noting, having the apprehension of the thing, whatever it might be, a word, a feeling, a thought, a concept, in the moment that it actually happens. Because the moment it's happened, it's gone. Once it's gone, it's just a memory. So then we have a memory. We know it's a memory. We know it's not the thing anymore. So knowing a memory for a memory, or having an idea, you can have that moment. Yes, I'm having an idea, but the moment the idea is formed, it's already dying. Whatever comes into our awareness has a beginning and a middle and an end. It's transient, which is anicca, which means it's impermanent. So the key characteristic of phenomena, of reality, is transience, impermanence. Because of impermanence and because of our constant search for well-being, we are constantly, in some form, being frustrated. We're not having the sense of fulfillment. So we'll have an idea and a memory of something pleasant. We'll go for it. because we want it. The moment we have it, it's already dying. It's the moment we get what we want, whether it be a bar of chocolate or a beautiful partner, they're already on the way out. It's just, we pick up a glass and it's broken. We're in a relationship, it's already dead in a sense, looking at it from a really very penetrating perspective of reality. So we have impermanence, we have the suffering that comes from identifying and trying to hold on to changing phenomena. And this applies not only to what we experience, but to the very mind-body organism that is experiencing it all. And that's, of course, the teaching of anatta, of not self. It's not that we don't have a self, it's that the self that we have is so transient, it doesn't have any essential permanent substance or structure. So seeing into our personality, seeing into our mind, body, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, that they're all transient. There is nobody there. But what is present in all of these experiences is awareness. And so the waking up to our awareness is basically waking up to our Buddha nature, our awakened nature, which not only knows what things are, but knows, as it were, knows that it knows. There's a knowing of knowing. And in that there is peace. And the only thing that prevents a full appreciation and relaxation and acceptance of that peace is our likes and dislikes, our restlessness, our constant searching for something other. So there's a constant process of, as it were, refinement and purification and working on our likes and dislikes, knowing them for what they are, and not cultivating or perpetuating those that lead into attachment and suffering, and avoiding not getting caught up in those, and, as it were, reinforcing, supporting that which is in line with the nature of reality. In other words, not holding on to things, letting go, accepting situations, and trusting a deeper wisdom that we all have in response to the conditions that we experience in terms of finding solutions to problems which don't necessarily take advantage or abuse other people or nature. So that's quite a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully it's a pointer. And the really, really important thing is that this reality is actually being experienced as we speak. It's not something out there. It's right here all of the time. So we don't have to look anywhere for it because it's right there. There is a lovely saying which is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. I don't know how true it is, but it's a beautiful one. What we are looking for is what is looking. I leave that for you to reflect on. It's a very, very, very powerful saying. What we are looking for is what is looking. In other words, we already have it. It, quote unquote, using the limitations of language. That's really such an important thing to register and reflect on. Put it up on your fridge or on your notice board in your hall. What I am looking for is what is looking. What does that mean? Because we're always looking outside of ourselves. There's a me looking for something out there. And that actually separates us from phenomena, separates us from things. Actually, everything that we're experiencing is already in us, as it were. And most importantly, of course, this is this background awareness that is always, always present. Whether happy, sad, in doubt, confused, we actually know when we're confused. When we're unhappy, we know that we're unhappy. Don't have to label it. We can do just to help us, but actually, I'm confused. So we get so upset by being confused that we lose sight of the fact that we actually know that we're confused. Our knowing is what matters. What we know keeps on changing. So we're just truthful with that. And if we don't know, we just say, oh, I don't know. Right, okay. Accept that I don't know. And then there's a knowing of acceptance of not knowing. It sort of limits the unnecessary hunting for something or searching for something which we already have.
Right. Yeah. Right. Reality is really what is already there. It's what we already have, what we know or what we don't know. It's already, it's what...
You know, we have to be careful with language, you know, what we have. Yes, we don't have anything. Things just come and go. And that's why, you know, another perspective on an enlightened frame of mind is basically emptiness, realizing emptiness. You know, because awareness is like space. It has no limits, has no boundaries. Because it's always present, it's not time-bound, so it's referred to as the deathless, or in theistic traditions referred to as the eternal. It's always present. It passes no judgment, it's completely non-judgmental. This is, you know, but so yet it includes the personal, but it's not personal, it's completely impersonal, and yet it includes the personal. So we're going into a category which basically is not a category anymore. It's beyond categories. It's indefinable. Can't be defined. It can be sort of talked around and pointed to. But of course, the main thing is to expose oneself to these sort of mental constructs so that they eventually fall apart. So we go beyond the construct. You know, the moment something becomes something, it becomes an object. Any object that comes into being, whether it be a physical object, an emotional state of being, or a mental construction, mental fabrication of some kind, the moment it flowers, it's already dying. And our acceptance of that actually leads to freedom, leads to an existential relaxation. But of course, it means letting go of some really, really deep attachments that we're all not only born with, but you're reinforced. And so we go through this painful process of transformation. And I say it's painful because it's quite unsettling. You know, we're brought up, perhaps hopefully, by loving parents in society, which, you know, puts us through schooling. We're exposed to education. We hopefully live in a relatively stable society. But actually, we take it all for granted, but we become very dependent on it for our well-being. And at some point in our spiritual inquiry, we suddenly feel and sort of have a growing awareness that what we take for granted actually is very, very uncertain, very, very unsettled. So the cracks start opening up in the ground starts shifting, stable reference points start disappearing. And it's very disorientating and really quite shocking in many cases. It's a real shock to the system, which is why it's good to have a good practice and good friends, because we go through a sort of a crisis almost always if it's a deeper transformation, where our familiar world just falls apart. We're completely at sea. But actually what's breaking are all the core constructs that we invest our sense of identity in. And as I say, it's very unsettling when it happens. It's almost inevitable that it should happen. But hopefully you have enough support around you to see you through it and survive. But I mention that because it's not often spoken about. Yeah. Did somebody say something?
I can say something if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Please do. We have.
Okay. Yeah. It is. You are on a very good run, very inspired. So I thought, let's throw it in. Just in some other Theravada settings, they say awareness always there. No. It is the first factor of enlightenment or awakening that needs to be developed. Yeah, and also, and it might just be a matter of language, how it is put across and so on. What do you mean developing awareness if it is already there? And the other one is awareness of awareness, but in the dead of the night, when there is, say, no object to awareness, where is awareness?
Well, I didn't quite catch your first point.
How what do you mean in the awareness that needs to be developed because it is the first factor of awakening, yeah, and they are all meant to be developed.
Okay, well, again, it's personal experience. What does it mean developing awareness if we have it already? Yes, we have it already, but we get lost in the contents of our awareness. We don't have those contents of awareness without awareness being there. So basically, it's gradually letting go and seeing through how we over-identify with the contents. That means that's what's refining awareness. So basically, we recognize what is present all of the time as opposed to getting lost in the contents. That's basically and that's something you can do individually in your practice. So that's one of the points. And the other point you said?
The other point is a subtle one. In the dead of the night, when there is no dream, no content to awareness, where is awareness?
Well, you're aware that you've got no dream, no content. You're basically in a state of stillness, of still awareness.
But you're not really aware of being aware, are you?
No,
I mean,
because
you are conscious in the sense that if a loud sound takes place, you wake up maybe or whatever, which means something was there to potentially to be aware of things. But if awareness is not awareness of something or as something.
Okay, it's very simple. It's ultimate subjectivity.
How does it fit in with the conditioned co-production where the two come into being together? The
ultimate subjectivity means there's no subject-object relationship.
Okay.
It's all just subjectivity. It's just perfect subjectivity.
Okay, it is one way of putting it. Yeah.
Where there's no identity, nothing to identify with. And in fact, if you go into the samadhi states, essentially what you're experiencing is pure consciousness. But there is still a state which one usually withdraws from, which is why even samadhi states are transient. But we, as it were, get a glimpse of ultimate subjectivity in the samadhi states. But we revert back and come back to our patterns, our subtle attachments, our sense of identity, restlessness, and essentially the ignorance that has to be finally translated in full enlightenment. But I can only speak about that theoretically because I'm not fully enlightened.
Could we, as an analogy, could we say that awareness slides towards a subject-object on one side of the polarities, and on the other side, it can slide towards the deathless?
Awareness includes everything, and yet is not identified with anything. And its essential quality is it can't be defined, it can only be said by what it's not. So the via negativa is the only way to really create some sense of what it might be about. But ultimately it's to be known individually, as it says in the book, by the wise. So our aspiration is to be wise.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for your questions. Right. I'd like to suggest that we do a closing chant, a nice simple one, which is the Reflections on Universal Well-Being, which is on page 41, which Wendy will put up. After we've done the chant, I'll just say a very few closing words, and then we'll stay on for those who want to stay on, but otherwise we'll close the class formally. So if you'd like to mute yourselves, if you haven't done so already, and we'll chant the Reflections on Universal Well-Being. Now let us chant the Reflections on Universal Well-Being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. Very beautiful chant. So we'll go to the closing homage on page 28 in Pali. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Wow. That closes our class formally. Next week, Martin will be taking the class. For the next few weeks, it'll be lay teachers, and then hopefully in April, from April onwards, we might have some visits from some nuns who will be teaching us. We haven't finalized the program yet, but we'll let you know. So I wish everybody a safe journey home if you're not home already, and I hope you've all had or on the way to getting a vaccine and keeping yourselves safe and well. And I look forward to our paths crossing again at some future event or class. If you'd like to stay on a little bit longer with any other questions, then feel free to do so. We'll stay on for another few minutes if people are interested. But otherwise, farewell, travel well, be well, and safe.